And again, a quick preview of what we expect to happen. Umbilicals will retract, then we'll see those docking hooks disconnect, and then we'll actually see those undocking burns followed pretty shortly after by a departure burn.
Dragon SpaceX, undock sequence commanded.
Pepper copies.
So that undocking sequence right on time.
And that was 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, 11:30 p.m. GMT. The umbilical now retracting. The International Space Station flying 263 statute miles over Namibia in Africa.
Dragon SpaceX, umbilical demate complete and nominal.
There's confirmation of the umbilicals retracted, so no longer receiving power or data or commanding from the International Space Station. And there's a view on your screen of Dragon, currently in eclipse. Gary, how's it looking from mission control at Johnson?
We're looking good, Shiva. We are now inside the undocking sequence. Good umbilical retraction. Standing by for the driving of those hooks. There's 12 hooks that will be released in 2 gangs of 6. Standing by for the driving of the hooks. Here we have good motion on the primary set of hooks. Again, first set of hooks driving, the navigation light, the forward end of Dragon clearly visible from this view from one of the Japanese cameras.
Dragon SpaceX, all hooks open and nominal.
All hooks open.
Dragon departing.
Dragon SpaceX, separation confirmed.
Copy, separation
Great
confirmed.
burns. Physical separation 4:35 p.m. Pacific. Thrusters looking good. Counting down to a nominal departure burn 0 coming up shortly.
Dragon SpaceX, depart burn 0 complete.
Copy, complete. We're visors up.
And you heard depart burn 0 complete, that 12-second firing, moving Dragon slightly faster away from the International Space Station using those service section Dracos. And with that, Bob and Doug have concluded their stay aboard the International Space Station. They're on their way back to planet Earth. Confirms a physical separation at 4:35 p.m. Pacific as the station and Dragon were flying 267 statute miles over Johannesburg, South Africa. 2 good undocking burns and a nominal departure burn 0. Next departure burn coming up in about 5 minutes. We'll be monitoring Crew Dragon throughout the departure sequence, but with Dragon flying free, that'll do it from us here in Mission Control Houston. Godspeed, Bob and Doug. To take you through the rest of the departure sequence, we'll send you back over to Hawthorne.
Thanks, Gary. Departure burn 0 sets Crew Dragon, Endeavour, and Bob and Doug on their journey home. Dragon ship Endeavour is now on a trajectory to head up and over the station before additional maneuvers will change its orbital path to take it below and in front of the station. Dragon will autonomously accomplish that through 3 additional departure burns, with that next one coming up in just a couple of minutes to get Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley well away from the space station and on their way home.
Beautiful view. Just had a beautiful view there of the relative navigation sensors providing an infrared view of the International Space Station as Bob and Doug drift away from it. And of course, as they are drifting away, going into that slightly higher orbit, just because of balancing the force of gravity along with their centripetal acceleration, they will move a little bit slower than the space station. And so we'll expect space station to sort of drift ahead, and then as they conduct those additional burns, getting out of the approach ellipsoid and the keep out sphere, then they will come back down below space station, with their apogee being about 10 kilometers below space station and slowly reducing their perigee.
Next up in just a couple of minutes, scheduled for 4:40 p.m. Pacific time and 11:40 p.m. GMT will be depart burn 1. That's a 20-second burn to further increase the opening rate between Crew Dragon and the International Space Station.
Yeah, and that view, what we just previously had, and you can actually see it on the right-hand screen of Bob's display, is a relative navigation sensor that's providing an infrared view from the forward hatch of Dragon, looking back towards the forward module of the International Space Station. So that's where Dragon has been for the last 63 days. Coming up in less than a minute is departure burn number 1. This burn coming just about 5 minutes after separation. And this is going to increase that opening rate between the space station and Dragon.
And separation occurred on time today, as with everything else occurring on schedule, sending Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley back toward Earth, back toward home.
So very, very exciting moment. We should expect to hear a call out here for departure.
Endeavor's a great ship. Godspeed. Endeavor copies all. Thanks, Chris.
And we just heard some kind words exchanged between Crew Dragon and Endeavour, with Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley now on their way home.
ISS and Dragon on the big loop. Endeavour has exited the keep out sphere. See you guys when you're back home.
Endeavor copy.
Behnken and Hurley leaving behind
this burn, so depart burn 2 at the apogee, performing an orbital burn or imparting velocity to the spacecraft at the highest point of the orbit is actually the most efficient way to move the opposite end of the orbit. So in this case, because we want to bring our perigee, or lowest point of our orbit, down a little bit further, we're trying to conduct that burn at the apogee and get the most bang for your buck and most mileage out of that propellant.
after they'll have depart burn 3. That'll be a 41-second burn. So as we mentioned earlier, it's kind of like a co-elliptic burn, and it will keep Dragon always down below the International Space Station. Later tonight, we'll be looking for a phasing burn. That'll be the longest one we've seen so far at over 6 minutes. And it'll put Crew Dragon on the proper orbital path to line it up with the splashdown zone. And then eventually we will have our deorbit burn tomorrow. We'll see the nose cone close, we'll see the trunk jettison, and they will come on home looking for a splashdown tomorrow in the Gulf of Mexico, specifically at our Pensacola landing site.
Yeah, the departure burn, taking a look at the data, expected around 10:48 Pacific time, +7 let's see, that would be around 5 o'clock in the morning or so.
For GMT.
GMT. And again, that's the last major burn planned for tonight. That'll happen right before Bob and Doug end up getting some shut-eye for the night. They'll get about 8 hours of sleep, and then tomorrow morning get a wake up from the core to get them started on preparation steps for the final burn of the mission, which will be that deorbit burn. And then hopefully a successful re-entry, currently on its way away from the International Space Station.
Speaking of the International Space Station, another Ask NASA question, this one from Colin, who asks, how do you keep time on the ISS? Well, you've heard us working to convert that in our heads. The International Space Station uses GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time. It's kind of the in-the-middle space between Russia and Houston, and so since those are two of the major partners in International Space Station operations, we use that time aboard.
Some cool views from the cameras on board the International Space Station. And one other note there, GMT is also sometimes referred to as UTC, or Universal Coordinated Time. They both mean the same thing, just slightly different nomenclature. And you may hear some of those calls over the nets and from the core.
It's now been 30 minutes since Crew Dragon separated from the International Space Station, an on-time departure. Separation coming at 4:35 p.m. Central, 11:30 p.m. GMT. It has completed its first two departure burns, Depart Burn 0 and Depart Burn 1. And the next will happen in about 22 minutes. We'll be looking for Depart Burn 2. The astronauts, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, are now out of their spacesuits. They won't need to put those back on until tomorrow, just before the deorbit burn.
So another question on social media right now lines up well with the view we have of Dragon. From Michelle, why is Dragon glowing right now? And actually, Dragon isn't glowing. What we're seeing is the reflection of the sun. So right now, both Dragon and the International Space Station, not in the Earth's shadow. And just from this view on the camera, compared to everything else being so dark in the background of space, Dragon is just coming out looking a little bit whitewashed, just from the exposure. So not glowing, but just seeing the reflection of the sun as we sort of adjust the white balancing. Now, actually, Dragon right now departing about 4.4 meters per second, about 3.3 kilometers away from the space station. So what we're seeing on the screen is a view from the International Space Station. Inside, we've got bags designed by the SpaceX team that fit inside of them, and then inventory of supplies, water, medical supplies, of course, crew personal supplies, and food. Looks like right now Bob getting some great snaps of Australia. I'm pretty excited to see what those turn out to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very impressed with their photography skills while on board the International Space Station. And astronauts, before they depart for the space station, actually get a little bit of a photography class from our teams at Johnson Space Center. So it helps them determine a target and how to frame it, because Earth observation is a really important part of some of the research that we do. As we mentioned, it looked like earlier Doug Hurley was able to get a picture of Hurricane Isaias, And we've seen, you know, land changes over the years from the International Space Station, tropical storms and hurricanes, and so it's an important part of what we do aboard the space station by doing those Earth observations.
And of course, also getting some opportunities to look at the heavens as well. We got some cool photos earlier of Comet Neowise from the International Space Station above all of the atmospheric distortion that you would see on the ground. Of course, when ground telescopes look at those, especially the large telescopes, the way to interpret this is the distance to the International Space Station. And really what we're trying to convey here is that the spacecraft, both the International Space Station and Dragon, are on ellipses. And their ellipses are only the same when they're both attached to each other. When they separate from each other, what we're trying to capture is the apogee and the perigee, so the highest point and the lowest point, as well as capturing time. So on this graphic right now, we're showing sort of time. So at depart burn 0, we've got the Dragon spacecraft moving a distance away from the space station. So that's what that first curve represents. And then at depart burn 1, sort of the vertical axis here is trying to represent the apogee or the highest points of the orbit. That is, Dragon is moving a little bit higher above the space station's orbit. And moving away from it. Then, as we were talking about earlier, because of orbital mechanics, going into a higher orbit and the sort of interaction between centripetal force and gravitational force, spacecraft that are further out will go slower on their orbits. So as we go into a higher orbit, represented as the sort of the up-down direction on this photo, we'll end up falling behind the International Space Station. At the time that we performed departure burn 2. Now, at departure burn 2, we're actually reducing the overall apogee and perigee of the spacecraft to get into a point where we're about 10 kilometers below the space station. And again, because of how speeds in ellipses around orbits work, we'll end up speeding up and sort of moving ahead of the space station. Finally, there is shown the departure phasing burn. So what those two burns are showing, and you can actually kind of tell from the dashed line there, is just trying to show that the apogee and perigee of Dragon over time is moving up and down until we actually do that final deorbit burn. And that deorbit burn isn't actually a direct drop into the atmosphere, but it puts us onto an ellipse that will land us close to our targeted landing site near Pensacola, Florida. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an explainer of how to interpret these charts. I know the first time I saw one of these in my own training, I had no idea how to read it. And so the departure phasing burn is expected for later today. That'll be actually a pretty long burn, lasting about 6 minutes. That's expected to happen around 5:48 a.m. UTC and around 10:48 p.m. Pacific time. That'll be the last major burn for tonight. Will actually come while Bob and Doug are getting some rest in the Dragon spacecraft.
And if you're just joining us, that is along the lines of what they're getting the opportunity to do now. As Dragon is fully autonomous, they are just monitoring
pulled during the ascent phase, just like a mild roller coaster. So the vehicle is now over the Gulf of Mexico. It is approaching the landing zone off the coast of Florida near Pensacola, and there we have our first shot.
There it is, the first view from the WB-57 airplane. It is dipping in and out a little bit. This is going to be an infrared camera showing us Dragon re-entering.
Right about now, the capsule is going about 400 miles per hour, decelerating quickly.
And standing by for drogue deploys.
Visual, 2 drogue.
Dragon down significantly. We are anticipating splashdown and
Just passed about 300 meters. 1 minute till splashdown.
$200. We are braced for splashdown.
Copy, brace for splashdown.
so there we heard Bob and Doug reporting that they are bracing for a splashdown. We should be able to see the Gulf of Mexico here in the shot just momentarily, as we're now just about 20 meters off the ocean.
To bladders in the service section of the capsule, but they're upright. We already see the fast boats approaching. They touched down, came right on time at 11:48 a.m. Pacific, 1848 UTC. Bob and Doug now in the water, and the recovery ops, they've already begun. We already see the fast boats starting to move in. We're still maintaining that good communication back with Bob and Doug.
Vessel. Bob and Doug are still strapped into their seats, kind of like an airplane. You know, they say, do not unbuckle your seatbelt until the captain determines that it's safe to do so. They will remain in their seats throughout the entire recovery process, essentially until it's time to get them out. Like I said, we are expecting to lift Dragon onto the Go Navigator recovery ship in about 21 minutes. And then in 28 minutes, we will be opening that hatch and beginning crew egress, also known as exit.
And we did hear the rigging is pretty much complete, so right as they arrive there at the capsule, the main recovery vessel will be able to begin getting it up out of the water.
So now as the recovery vessel Go Navigator is getting closer to Dragon's position there off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, we're able to see the capsule in a little bit more detail. It is certainly no longer a bright shade of white. Like we said, those external temperatures were reaching up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So the thermal protection systems enable Dragon to return while keeping the internal temperature rather temperate.
And you are seeing a few more boats than expected. The team's currently working with a few private vessels in the area, making sure that they get out of there. And now we see one of the SpaceX fast boats moving in.
Have an open hatch.
And you can see the main recovery vessel in the top right there. That's the helipad with the big SpaceX X on top. It's now backing up towards the capsule.
Certainly not to be confused with one of our landing drone ships. There's a live view of Dragon floating in the water there in the background, along with many onlookers, certainly from a safer distance at this point. This is a live shot coming from Go Navigator, our primary recovery vessel here. So it's Crew Dragon is also accompanied by the fast boats that are helping to bring it in closer. And there you can see a couple of the recovery team members on the deck. And also just behind them, we get our first good view of the nest. Yes, so this is essentially the nest in the background there. Dragon will be hoisted using the hydraulic lift out of the water and into that nest. That nest will then be pulled towards the camera from this view, towards those individuals on that upper deck there. And that's where the...
Dragon SpaceX comm check.
Loud and clear, Solo, how us?
Loud and clear as well, and from the video, it looks like the boat is about one length away, about 5 to 10 meters, backing up to you.
Copy that. Thanks for the update.
All right, so good news there. We're getting ready to see Dragon to be lifted out of the water and into the recovery nest. As I was saying, that nest will be pulled towards the camera, towards that upper deck that we saw there, and that's where the medical stretcher.
And if you look closely, immediately above the hatch, you can see the area where you can see them working in now. That's where those drogue chutes deployed from. The two circles on either side were where the mortars were.
They've been, that the crew have been giving us along the way. It sounds like they're doing great, they're feeling good, and they're pretty comfortable there inside a Crew Dragon.
And Dragon SpaceX, we show 0.4 parts per million on NTO, 18 parts per billion of MMH. That's below limits. We are proceeding with hatch opening.
Okay, great news. Thanks, Mike.
All right, so there's the green light we've been waiting for. In fact, the green light we've been waiting for months at this point. This is our first opportunity to say hello to Bob and Doug, our favorite space dads, as they are now about to egress or exit from Dragon Crew Endeavour. Again, this is the culmination of what has been about a 19-hour journey home, all starting yesterday as they departed the International Space Station. So this hatch will be manually opened, and once doing so, Flight Surgeon Neil Menon will say hello and make sure that they're still doing all right, and then proceed to assist them with exiting the capsule.
And we see the hatch is now open. Hatch being opened at 12:59 p.m. Pacific. hatch is open.
So right now they're going to put a piece of equipment in there that basically smooths out the edges and makes sure that it is a comfortable exit from the Dragon capsule. Just a little piece of structure there to ensure that the hatch will remain open and that any sharp edges around that side hatch are protected.
In the blue suit there, that's one of NASA's flight surgeons for the crew. That's Dr. Stephen Hart. And that hatch open coming at 12:59 p.m. Pacific. That's 1959 Universal Time, or GMT.